Welcome to PopNerdery, the show that is nerdier than being a volunteer judge at a unicycle competition while sitting upon your bedazzled Segway. I'm your host, Brent. Welcome to PopNerdery Episode 4. This is an opportunity for us, the PopNerdery crew, to talk about some things, and you're welcome to join in. If this is the first time you are joining us, welcome. I do have a gaggle of Google-fed geeks here with me to dive into some fun topics. The Batman to my Alfred, Dave. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, Brent. How are you?
I'm good. I don't know if that was a compliment or a diss, but we're just going to move along with it.
Yeah, I do like how you chose to make yourself my butler and/or father figure.
Exactly. I am bald, so there's that. At least in the comics, at some point, he was referenced as less than a full head of hair, unlike Michael Caine.
Now he uses a pencil mustache.
Yeah, working on it. And also with me today is the Sherlock to my Watson, Toph.
Hi, Brent. Toph Rowden, PopNerdery's resident raconteur and your favorite rapper's favorite blogger. Got a little house cleaning to take care of here. Obviously, you've already put our mellifluous words into your ear holes, so you're doing something right today. Congratulations. You're off to a great start. Keep it up. You can also follow us on the Twitters at PopNerdery, PopNerdery. We comment on things. We spit out hot, flaming takes. We inappropriately hashtag things, and mostly just subtweet like you normally do on the Twitters. You got 3 ways to listen to the show. The first one is on the website, PopNerdery.com. We archive the episodes there. We argue in the comments, and we have long discussions on Life Day about which Ewok was our favorite.
Wicket.
It's Wicket. It's always Wicket.
Lowbray. I'm the only one that can name another Ewok. I win.
Damn it. Right. The second way to listen to the podcast is on the old iTunes. Jump to the podcast section, fire up that old search box, and enter PopNerdery in there. You can rate, you can review, you can say nice things about me. Those are kind of your only options. Don't you dare say anything mean. The third way for you to listen to the show is to accurately guess the weight of Admiral Akbar's head, and Dave will come to your house and podcast over your shoulder live.
Don't do it. It's a trap.
It's a trap!
Oh, man. All right, well, let's jump into the news, guys. First, before we start, someone mentioned Life Day.
I always do.
But someone told me that in Jedi, it was supposed to be a Wookiee planet, but George didn't have the money, I guess, to make it a Wookiee planet.
Didn't
have enough human hair to make enough Chewie suits. But that would have made for a much more badass Return of the Jedi, right?
Yes. I can shine a little bit of light into the situation.
All right, let's do it quickly and jump into the news.
At one point, there was just one movie draft, The Adventures of Luke Starkiller, if you will. And at one point, Han Solo's co-pilot was not a Wookiee, but the Wookiee species was in George Lucas' mind. And in Act 3 of The Adventures of Starkiller, Star Wars, they ended up on a jungle planet with big 8-foot Wookiees, and they were a primitive species, and they needed to bound together with the rebels to defeat the Empire. And so that just got kind of reworked into, Han's co-pilot is the 8-foot hairy beast, not that primitive, and now we need the primitive species, so we shrunk the Wookiees and turned them into taters.
So
that's my understanding.
So not a financial limitation, because I could not imagine 20th Century Fox not just giving him all the money he needed.
Correct.
We have a really interesting idea. It was a Wookiee planet. What if they were smaller? We could sell more toys that way.
I feel like your George Lucas is Kermit.
It kind of is Kermit, but
basically.
But listeners, we are now joined by George Lucas.
Making green.
I was going to leave this to the end, but we're talking about it now. We are officially less than a month out from The Force Awakens as of this recording, which I know, right? Can't even wait. I still have managed to stay excited, despite all of the, I've just been bombarded with it, especially over the last month. I don't know about you guys, but I have made the decision after the third trailer. I don't want to see any more footage, so I haven't watched any more since then. Have tried to stay away from spoilers outside of the 3 major trailer releases. But somebody, I'm looking at this on Heroic Hollywood, somebody talked to George Lucas a little bit about why sell off to Disney, why not direct these movies anymore. In a Q&A on Vanity Fair, which featured a cameo from J.J. Abrams, Lucas had this quote: "You go to make a movie and all you do is get criticized, and people try to make decisions about what you're going to do before you do it. It's not that much fun, and you can't experiment, you can't do anything, you have to do it a certain way. I don't like that. I never did. Started out in experimental films, wanted to go back to experimental films. But, of course, no one wants to see experimental films." So I thought it was really telling.
Well, we don't want to see your experimental films because they suck.
Well,
or maybe we do with properties that we're not familiar with yet.
But that's a great point.
Yeah, it just comes up. He comes across as a guy who is just really shell shocked after the backlash from the prequel trilogy, which kind of stinks. And I know that I have recommended it on a couple of occasions here. But there's a documentary called The People versus George Lucas that spends the first 60 minutes bashing him, and the last 15 minutes doing a mea culpa and saying, listen, yeah, you gave us those 3-4 movies, if you count Crystal Skull, that we hate, but you gave us these 3-6 movies that we love, and we'll never we'll always have good feels about those. So I do kind of feel bad on one hand that George is so shell shocked, but on the other hand, I am very glad that the reins have been handed off, and I'm very excited still about Force Awakens. It also looks like someone brought this up on a website that I was reading earlier this week, that hey, for Star Wars fans, if you really, really love Star Wars, be excited because Star Wars will never end now. Now that Disney owns Star Wars, they will happen in perpetuity, probably until we all die, right? And then we'll continue on after that. And that's a thing that I yearned for forever. My whole life, I just wanted more Star Wars. And I wanted more Star Wars and big budget films, because you always had the extended universe, things like that. But I don't know if that's a thing that I want. I don't know if I want Star Wars movies forever. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
I'll go first. I saw that same thing, and it made me realize that while if you told me when I was 12 that by the time I was 30 there'd be a Star Wars movie coming out every year of my life, potentially for the next 30 years of my life, I think that would just make me jump for joy. But yeah, I think we can definitely end up getting overly saturated. But I also think that thankfully there is a track record of how they're handling the Marvel Universe and how they're handling, the TV shows versus the movies, and using different mediums to kind of interlace all of the ideas and all of the characters that can be explored. It gives me hope that this Star Wars saga can be about the Skywalker family, and it can have its beginning and its end well designed. And then if we just get stories set in the Star Wars galaxy over the Star Wars timeline, I'd love to see some of the Old Republic stuff really explored in Hollywood cinematic terms. I think that could be very fun, and it could be very fresh and uninhibited, because there's not a whole lot of George Lucas expectations to stick to and things. That it could be great, but we could get oversaturated really quickly, and it could all just be, a bunch of garbage that they just keep pushing out because people keep buying tickets.
Yeah, and I feel like this is something that we're going to encounter a lot with a lot of our favorite franchises, because there's a huge financial incentive right now to put them out. So they're going to be put out one way or the other. And this is a larger conversation that I'd like to have at some point. but you have to be okay with there being a few duds, right? You have to be okay with, maybe this Star Wars movie in 2018 wasn't great, but I'm still going to look forward to the one in 2019, and not let, a rotten egg ruin the whole bunch.
Right. Some of the Thor movies are bad, but we're still excited about the overall track Marvel's taking, right? I don't need everything to be gold.
Yeah, and I could debate you about I like the first Thor movie, but I agree with your premise. And I think as comic book fans, especially you and I, Toph, we've been doing this for a long time, right? There are certain creators that you follow, or there are certain characters that you follow, and you get to pick and choose which ones you want to buy and trade and have on your shelf. And those are the stories that are your canon.
Yeah, and for every bad Alan Moore story, we got 10 that were, some of the best ever written. And same with Frank Miller, and on and on and on. It's you follow him, and the stuff that isn't great, you go, fine. Now that means you can go do something else that I might be really, really excited about.
Exactly. All right, so moving on. Speaking of Frank Miller is doing a lot of press right now because Dark Knight 3, The Master Race, is releasing at the end of this month, at the end of November. It is the follow-up to what is, if you're a comic book fan and Dark Knight Returns isn't in your top 5, you're not doing it right.
What are you doing?
Exactly. So Dark Knight Returns, then there's Dark Knight Strikes Again, which is the second, in the series. Not so great. I don't think anyone has much love for it. I'm personally nervous for Dark Knight 3. We haven't seen any dialogue from it. We've seen a couple panels. It's going to be Frank Miller along with Brian Azzarello. Frank Miller is in declining health. So they're co-writing along with, I believe it's Andy or Adam Kubert doing art, and Frank Miller, along with pretty much everyone who's ever put a pencil to paper for DC, is doing covers for the damn thing. But yeah, so Frank Miller's out doing interviews for Dark Knight 3. He has said many, many things, which, he's typically not a big media guy, so you don't. When you get news from Frank Miller, it all comes in bunches, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And this week he said, that after I've done this work on Dark Knight 3, I'm very, invigorated. I'm going to do Dark Knight 4, and I'm going to do, an all-ages book with the female Robin from Dark Knight Returns, like a Nancy Drew style book, which these things seem interesting, and I guess to the point that I just made, it doesn't have to be part of, my Batman canon if it's not good or it's not great, but at least you get another shot, right? You get another, bullet in the chamber where it could be great. It could be another, Frank Miller classic.
Sure.
So if you have any thoughts on Dark Knight 3, Dark Knight 4, anything Frank Miller has lined up?
I'm kind of with you too. Is just like we were just saying. I'll always read or give a Miller run a shot of basically everything. But 2 is just so completely meh that I don't. My expectation is set pretty low for these. So especially when I heard that they're doing the 2 of them, great. I'm willing to get those a shot, but I think I'm going to kind of wait to, I'm not going to get super excited for these until I actually get my hands on them.
Yeah, and I do. It is one of those things, and, we talked last episode about the way in which things are presented. I liked reading Dark Knight Returns as one whole volume. Yeah. So I want to wait to get all 4 of them in my hands because it's a 4-part miniseries. I'd like to get all 4 parts and read it in one volume, but I'm not sure I'm going to be able to wait. The idea that intrigues me, because he's done Dark Knight Strikes Again, and he did All-Star Batman and Robin. Neither of those things were really great. I'm not as excited about Dark Knight 3 as I am about this Nancy Drew, Carrie Kelly book.
Honestly, that piqued my interest far more than a lot of the other stuff. Yeah. I mean, it was like great, 3 and 4, 2-parter, awesome, whatever. But yeah, truly, just like, oh shit, like some Nancy Drew type thing. I'm into that. That sounds good. Especially
because Frank Miller has always been known to be super dark.
Yeah,
very dark, exactly. Very gritty. He's the man. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably don't need me to tell you, but he's the man.
Tell me, because I don't know things. Pretend I'm the naive PopNerdery listener that needs you to explain it.
Frank Miller is
Pretend like I don't understand.
Frank Miller is the man who's known for giving us this version of Batman that we have all latched onto. Started in Dark Knight Returns and then in Year One. So I know that you've read Year One from cover to cover. We've covered that in the past, but he's pretty much responsible for the Batman that we all kind of fell in love with. Took him from the 70s Neil Adams, Denny O'Neil Batman, and brought him into this this era. A lot of the guys who are currently writing stuff that we like on Batman are guys who are kind of riffing off of that template. So
I think you can sum it up pretty quickly in saying that Frank Miller is probably the one who had the most to do with inventing the legend of the goddamn Batman.
Exactly. All right, to stay in DC, the DC Extended Universe, we definitely know we have Batman v Superman. We know that we have Suicide Squad. Something that's out there without a release date on it currently is Justice League Dark. This was the one that Guillermo del Toro was attached to for quite a while. And this week we had some potential casting get released. I was wondering if maybe you guys had some opinion on it. There was a rumor that they're looking at Colin Farrell for Constantine. They're looking at Colin Farrell for Constantine. They're looking at Ewan McGregor for a character named Jason Blood that I'm not very familiar with. And they're looking, but the one that really appeals to me is looking at Ron Perlman for the Swamp Thing. And I've read a couple of runs.
That's brilliant casting.
Yeah, and I think this is probably a holdover from when Del Toro was attached because
those dudes like each other.
Yeah.
Right.
Ron Perlman, for those of you that don't know, was Hellboy, and Guillermo del Toro directed both of those movies. So yeah, it was that one was one that seemed like a no-brainer to me. He's a guy who is very experienced in sitting in a makeup chair for 5 hours a day for months on end. And he's the guy that's a character that I would like to see. If you haven't, I would recommend picking up the first trade from the New 52. Scott Snyder wrote a really great couple of arcs on Swamp Thing, and I haven't. I'm not up to date on Swamp Thing. He's not one of my most favorite characters. But I like that take on it. When I dove back into the New 52, I pretty much gobbled up everything Snyder wrote.
There are a couple of incredible Swamp Things that Alan Moore did that are definitely worth reading and are absolutely seminal and very, very good, including one with Superman. That's probably one of my favorite Superman stories.
Nice.
My problem so I read Dark, which, again, this is like the epitome of everything that's wrong with what DC is doing, is they actually have a thing that's called Justice League Dark. Justice League Gritty. Justice League Hot Topic. Like, there's not, I mean, some of these characters have already been done, like John Constantine, already had a movie. We already tried this. It wasn't good.
And he had a TV show.
He had a TV show. That didn't work. It wasn't good. There's actually a character called Dead Man, so that's subtle and good. And then probably the thing that irritates me the most about this is that the fucking Frankenstein is a member of this. Like, why not just invite Dracula in The Creature from the Black Lagoon? Like, you're just taking shit from classic literature and being like, oh yeah, he's totally in our Justice League super noir.
Yeah, and I do like I do kind of like the mysticism part of it, the eerie horror kind of part of it, and it made perfect sense when Guillermo del Toro was attached.
Yeah,
that made perfect sense to me. But now that he isn't, it's kind of like when Ant-Man lost Edgar Wright, and I'm going to talk about Ant-Man in a minute, but which I ended up liking the movie. But it made way more sense when Edgar Wright was attached to it. It made more sense that you wanted to give that guy a shot at, a major Marvel character. Same thing here with Guillermo. That is a name that I have trouble with. Guillermo del Toro.
Though, there's other directors out there that I think we could trust doing stuff like that. So I'm with you. I think it needs to have the right tone to work. It needs to have the right director to create that tone. I mean, you could look at a Tim Burton or, who's the group that did like Nip Tuck and some of those. I think there's people that can certainly get that done. But yeah, I'm with you. If it was Del Toro, you would have had faith that it would have been done right for sure.
Yeah, and it's not like I still haven't seen Pacific Rim, so it's not like I run out to see a Guillermo del Toro movie when he does it. But I kind of trusted that he cared about those characters, right? And I think he was probably one of the only reasons why Warner's decided they wanted to go in that direction, because he has a relationship with them. So that was something that was interesting to me. Now, calling it Justice League Dark is a problem that both major companies have, because it's very difficult for them to sell a new book if you call it something that people are unfamiliar with. So you have Justice League Dark, you have Justice League America, Justice League Canada, recently Justice League United. On the Marvel side, you have Avengers, New Avengers, Young Avengers. You have Uncanny X-Men, All New X-Men. Pretty much everything is called some version of
something
Avengers.
You've already heard of.
Yeah, Avengers, X-Men, or Justice League. So
and that's where things all get, we get very, very run down when, and anyone who has any sort of savvy to them recognizes what they're doing. They're just playing the name to count on our dollar bills to come into their pockets. So
yeah, and at some point, as a consumer, I had to get past that and say, well, it's going to be called this, but maybe I have to give it a couple, give it a shot or two if I have. And usually it is, again, following the creator. So whether it's a director or whether it is a writer, following the creator and trusting the creator, or trusting somebody that that gives me a recommendation. So, Ant-Man is out on iTunes at least. I think the Blu-ray might be next week, but it is out on iTunes. And we weren't doing this podcast when Ant-Man came out. And I kind of wanted to get your guys' thoughts on A, have you seen it? Did you make an effort to go see it? And B, what did you think of it in terms of it kind of being a different tone for? It's obviously still a Marvel movie, but it's funnier and it laughs at itself a little bit more than any of the Marvel movies have so far. So I was kind of curious. It's just essentially an excuse for me to talk about Ant-Man a little bit.
I will admit I have not seen it. I am very interested in seeing it. I figured you guys would see it and tell me why I needed to see it. I do love myself some Paul Rudd, and I assumed it would have quite a comedy element to it. So it sounds like, based off your little setup there and everything I heard from kind of the interwebs, the Twitter, told me I would like it once I got a chance to go check it out. But I wasn't super familiar with the character before the movie came out. So
it did also feature a substantial amount of Paul Rudd, so you can be rest assured there that you get your Paul Rudd's worth in this movie. Tope, did you see it?
I didn't. For the exact reason that Brent is excited for it, Paul Rudd didn't sell a ticket to me. I don't need that much Paul Rudd in my life. So
here's my quick, 30-second pitch for why I think you should see it and the things that I liked about it. It did laugh at itself more than other things. So if you enjoy a comic series like Deadpool, or you enjoy a comic series, something like that where they poke fun a little bit. Some of Bendis's X-Men has done this recently, where they poke fun at the medium and they also poke fun at themselves. I think it does a good job of that. I also think the way that they tie Ant-Man into the rest of the Marvel Universe is really interesting. They do a lot. I think they do a really nice job of handling the multiple Ant-Men of it all, because you have Hank Pym and Scott Lang both in the movie. So there are two Ant-Men, and they jump timelines very well in the movie. I think they do a nice job. Also, any chance you get to see Michael Douglas having fun in a movie is kind of fun for me. I like Michael Douglas a lot as an actor, and I also think there aren't a lot of times where he can have fun in a film. A lot of times he plays, someone super serious, or someone that we're supposed to hate or supposed to dislike or supposed to judge in a certain way. And in this movie, he gets to do some things. And I I also think that the supporting cast in this movie is pretty good. There were some complaints about secondary characters not being fleshed out, but when are they in a Marvel movie, to be honest?
It's an Ant-Man movie. Just be happy you got the Ant-Man movie.
Exactly. I do think that I would have loved to see an Edgar Wright Ant-Man movie.
Yeah.
Some of the things in this movie that feel very Edgar Wright to me, I've heard after the fact, were actually this new director, Peyton, what's his face, and I can't remember his name, and now I feel like a jackass. But there are parts in this movie that do still feel very Edgar Wright. So I would recommend checking it out. It is out at least on iTunes right now. To stay in the MCU, Jessica Jones will be dropped.
Yep.
All 10 or 12 episodes, I believe, will be dropped on Netflix on Friday. They've released some teasers. This is a character I know of but have never read, have never dived in, taken a dive into Jessica Jones. But after the quality
that
level,
sounds dirty.
after the high quality that was Daredevil, I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good combination of noir kind of detective stuff because she, is a private investigator, and also it's going to start to dive into, I think, some of Marvel's mystic or whatever magical side of the universe. Her main villain is a guy named Kilgrave, another character I'm not particularly familiar with, but he does mind control from what I've seen in the teasers, and specifically has a thing for controlling the mind of someone who's very powerful. In this case, it's Jessica Jones. She has what seem to be Superman powers. She doesn't standard Superman powers, not the more crazy ones. She doesn't fly. She doesn't have laser vision, but she has super strength.
Freeze breath?
Where are we on freeze breath?
So I guess maybe just super strength and she can jump real high. Also seems to be a tad indestructible. She does bleed a little bit in the trailer, so I don't know how that goes. But
are you allowed to ask if someone has freeze breath in an interview? I know that those questions are legislated. Where is the question of where did you go to school, that kind of thing? But do you have freeze breath, and do we have to have comprehensive freeze breath insurance if you come into our workplace?
I mean, I think you're just doing your due diligence there. You're just being a good employer if you ask.
That's my thought.
But equal opportunity laws protect the freeze breathers. So I get worried about those sort of things. No, January Jones is barely on my radar as
Jones.
a character. Jessica. There we go.
January
what did I say?
Jones
January.
She's a real person.
Yeah. She's an actual human being, and it's weird.
She's more on my radar. Jessica Jones, the character was never on my radar, but I heard about this story or this show being launched, and I think because of the success of Daredevil, I think they're probably willing to go pretty dark with this one, and apparently the comic is pretty edgy and gets to some pretty deep psychological stuff that she goes through as a character, and has some sexual elements and things like that. So I don't know just how deep they're going to dive into all that, but that's the right medium to do it on Netflix, I think.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
It will be cool if Marvel allows themselves to go there with it, if they do it right, obviously. So
at least
I think
if the creators wanted to, right? And I think if the creators wanted to, they have the license to do it, which is interesting to me. I'm also really interested to see David Tennant in a Marvel property. I like David Tennant a lot as an actor. We've already had one Doctor. Chris Eccleston was the Dark Elf in Thor 2, if you guys remember seeing Thor 2.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Let's talk a little bit about Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott is yapping a lot about new Alien movies as well as new Blade Runner. Ridley Scott has a lot of goodwill built up right now because of The Martian. So The Martian made a boatload of money and was also critically acclaimed. It was fantastic. I saw it. I loved it. But since I saw The Martian, I did dive in and watch Alien, Aliens, and Prometheus back to back to back, and Ridley Scott lost most of his goodwill with me. I did. There were parts that I liked, and Brent and I have talked about this off air. We're not going to dive into all of Alien. I would more like to focus in on the brand new name for Prometheus 2, which is going to be Alien Covenant, which I'm not sure. Is this the same, Brent, as Alien Paradise Lost, and they changed the name again?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm assuming they just had issues trying to get naming rights where it included the words Paradise Lost next to each other.
John Milton's a dick.
But I don't have that on any good information or anything. But that would be one possible reason for the name change, because I mean they just came out with that recently, but Covenant came out I think today as the official name in the press release with an actual release date and all that stuff. So.
And I listened to Kevin Smith's most recent podcast, and they really broke it down like as a Insider Hollywood thing, where they said, the studio's probably like, hey Ridley, I'm not going to make Prometheus 2, but if you call it Alien : something, here's your money.
Talk again.
Right. So, I mean, a name is just a name, probably to get the damn thing made and into theaters.
Yep.
But are we? I guess I'm excited to see where it goes. I don't think it'll be a thing where, when I got done with Prometheus, I really was going to run out to the theater to see the next one. But I am interested to see if they're going to answer those. There are a lot of questions left over at the end of Prometheus, and I'm interested to see if they answer those things.
Yep.
Cool. Blade Runner 2 is in the news. Ridley Scott went on to describe what the opening to Blade Runner 2, and also there was some potential casting news with Ryan Gosling being added in some sort of mystery role. Dude kind of looks like a replicant, so I'm going to go ahead and just say that. He kind of looks like he's made of plastic. Like he should not be that good looking.
Seems perfect, yeah.
Yeah. A little, Rutger Hauer-esque, I guess. We talked about Blade Runner a little bit a couple episodes back about did we see it at the right time, wrong time, what have you. Are we excited about Blade Runner 2, or did we say all that needed to be said on replicants in the first one?
I love Blade Runner, and I don't need another one. I don't need another one. The concept is, the concept can go on forever about, it's fundamentally just about how humans treat each other. So, there's a lot to say on that subject, but I don't need a second Blade.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of really great standalone sci-fi films that could have gone to a second one, could have gone to a third one, could have gone to a fourth one, but did we really need it to? The one that comes to my mind from the last 10 years is Looper, right? Do I need another Looper? No.
Nope.
It's great by itself.
Yep.
So I don't need a second one. I don't need more there. And I kind of, I guess I kind of feel the same way about Blade Runner.
Yep.
I would say the differentiation for me is this a universe? Whatever sci-fi film we're in, did we establish a universe where I want to explore other characters' stories in this universe or not? And if the answer is no, I probably don't need another. I don't need a sequel unless your main character is so compelling that I really need to see where their life goes. I think the Ripley character in the Alien series was interesting enough for people, and the Alien was interesting enough for people to warrant the sequels. But for the same reason, I think you can leave Deckard alone. His story was complete. The ramifications of everything that happened in Blade Runner 1 don't need to be explored. I think Tron 2, waited however many years it did to come out and was met with a lot of dubious reactions. So. And
Riley's always said that he considers the Blade Runner universe and the Alien universe somehow concurrent, somehow tied in. Like Weyland-Yutani exists in both of those universes. So we've already kind of gotten a lot of films to explore the stuff that goes on. So, in some sense, yes, Alien is a separate movie from Blade Runner. However, there is some crossover, at least in terms of world building. So, again, I felt like we've spent a lot of time in this universe now, and I'm with you. I don't want any more.
Yeah. And I guess there is a part of you that says, you know what, Ridley Scott gave us some fun shit. If he really wants to dive back into that universe, go ahead. I just don't necessarily have to go with you.
As long as it's as pretty as Prometheus, then I'll look at it, but I may not listen to it.
Yeah.
I'll give him that.
All right. The last thing I want to talk about, this is real life. This is not movies. This is something that just happened. We're talking about science here occasionally. And I believe it was yesterday, the United States passed a piece of legislation that kind of soared through Congress, the U.S. Commercial Space Launch Competitiveness Act, which kind of paves the way for freedom from oversight for commercial spaceflight companies for the next 8 years. And people are saying this opens the door. One of the main pieces of the bill is, gives them a little bit of time to potentially get off the ground before, regulatory agencies come in to, make sure that this is happening in a safe way and in a way that complies with the values of the United States government. But it also lets all businesses keep whatever non-living things that they find in space.
Whoa.
So, speaking of Alien, it opens the door for, if you wanted to mine an asteroid. And I know that the Nostromo is a mining vessel.
Indeed.
We essentially are one step closer to the Nostromo existing, I guess. And I find that fucking interesting that we're going to run into some of these things where it's like, oh shit, this happened in a movie once.
So wait, hypothetically, you could go up to the moon and get the pieces of Apollo 11, and you can just have them?
I think they're more so talking about. I think Apollo 11
naturally occurring.
Yeah, I think Apollo 11 would still be considered NASA property, right?
Shit, they left it there, so
Yeah.
You threw it out of the window of this spaceship, bitch. Like, I'm keeping it.
I do like the part in The Martian where he talks about, no one explicitly gave me permission to take this piece of tech or whatever it was that they had previously sent to Mars, and he says, "Now I'm Mark Watney's space pirate." I do love that part.
That sounds like the most expensive game of finders keepers you could even ever put yourself through. But that the fact that they wrote that in is about the only thing that we ought to be discussing right now, right? Like, clearly they are ready for people to try and seek profit, or seek mineral riches by exploring what they can get to by going up there. So
we try to stay away from politics here on Pop Nerdery, but we all know how pieces of legislation get written, and a lot of them, they come from interests that are out there. So there's somebody out there that's telling their senator, telling their congressman, hey, this is important to me and my business.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to think of what is out there and what that's going to lead to. I don't know.
Paved the way for this piece of legislation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We know that SpaceX is out there. SpaceX is Elon Musk, right? That's SpaceX. But who else? We don't really hear a lot. We hear about Virgin Galactic, but that's more.
Yep. I'm
going to take a billionaire to space.
The quote-unquote space.
Yeah, quote-unquote. Yes, you're right.
The black part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm very interested to see what happens, and maybe when these commercial companies, that's probably redundant. Maybe when these companies start launching things into space, Americans will get excited enough to demand that NASA is properly funded.
Probably just Google again. Let's be honest.
Yeah. You mean Alphabet?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
All right. Way off.
All right, so that's going to do it for the news. We're going to take our first break, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Pop Nerdery Podcast. Here in our B segment, we're going to take some time to slide under the covers, snuggle up next to a topic, and really dive deep into it. We're gonna slither on in there and throw that thigh over the top and see what happens. No?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
Oh, every time.
Every time. This week, this got me thinking. We talked a lot about some reboots that, as we discussed, I don't think anyone's really excited about the Blade Runner coming back. There was the announcement of a Zoolander 2 this week that has a trailer. So, it's actually going to happen. Technically, I guess it's already happened, and then it's all going to just be inflicted on us at some point.
Time is a flat circle.
So it opened the conversation around the Untimely Demise shows, specifically TV shows that just never got off the ground or couldn't find their audience in an era before online streaming media was a thing, where that shows like Daredevil that started somewhere else and ended up going to Netflix and stayed out of development hell got a chance to live. So I wanted to kind of posit. I think there are a couple different subcategories to this, but obviously I think there's some shows that we would want to bring back. I think one of the most obvious options would probably be Firefly, where if we had a Netflix and Amazon Prime, something else like that, that show had enough of an audience that it could have done 5 or 6 seasons on the internet. And conversely, in the season of reboots that we're apparently in, I think there are a couple shows that I want to touch on a little bit around with a reboot now and maybe a slight adaptation or change could be really, really good and something that I would be far more interested in than I was when the show was actually on. So, Dave, is there something that you felt it got taken away from you too soon, like a beloved pet?
So I feel like I have 2 categories of this. One is all television, and the second is subcategory Aaron Sorkin. So I'm just going to knock Aaron Sorkin out real quick because I pretty much always, when we talk TV, this is where I go.
Just wake me up when he's done talking about Sorkin, okay?
That's fine, I'll call you.
So my number
buddy.
one, that will always be my number one in this category, is Sports Night. Sports Night was a half-hour comedy. The first season, ABC forced them to use a laugh track, even though it was filmed kind of similarly to how The Office was filmed, where it was filmed in a workplace, which was clearly not in front of a live studio audience. It ran for 2 seasons. It really found its footing in the second season, and we didn't get enough of it. It has your familiar Sorkin pitter-patter.
The walk and talks.
The walk and talks. It was framed around 2 sports anchors at a competitor to what essentially was ESPN, but they wanted to do it better, in the same vein as the newsroom. Another one of Sorkin's that didn't last long enough was, I really liked parts of Studio 60. Other people hated it, but I liked parts of it. I liked the behind-the-scenes stuff. It fell into a similar hole as the bad parts of Sports Night and the bad parts of the newsroom, where the thing that they were supposed to be really good at, which was writing a Saturday Night Live type sketch show, whenever they showed parts of that, they were really bad at it in the show. They weren't funny. But I really liked the characters, and it only lasted 1 season on NBC. So I'd bring that one back. Conversely, Sorkin has also had some stuff that has gone too long. I loved the first 2 seasons of The Newsroom, and I thought they were fine by themselves. And then there was a 3rd season that HBO didn't want to do and was goaded into doing, and it ended up being 12 episodes worth of content in 6 episodes worth of time. And
I don't think we have to acknowledge that. I don't acknowledge the 3rd season.
Exactly. It's just like not canon for you.
I do feel like on the Sports Night topic, that's a great shout. That laugh track kills it. It makes it unwatchable. But I really kind of feel like he almost got to reboot it as the newsroom. I mean, the 2 shows are very, very similar. Instead of having 2 kind of, well, that's not true. The newsroom is carried by Will McAvoy. However, there are central casts that are just as important. However, Sports Night had 2 really main protagonists, and it was that interaction. So I almost feel like we kind of got our wish, because I was with you. I loved Sports Night, and I kind of feel like the newsroom was its, if not direct reboot, kind of its spiritual reboot.
Yeah, I think definitely spiritual, and I think that there were times in Sports Night where you're like, man, this is really heavy for a show that deals with sports.
With an ESPN set, basically.
Exactly, and also that becomes a very different show in in today's ESPN world. That ESPN world was very different in 1998 than what we have, what ESPN has devolved into now. So it's very different. That could be a whole nother B segment on a whole nother day. So that's my Aaron Sorkin. I also think you could make the argument that The West Wing went a little bit too long, but I might come to your house and shank you because I love The West Wing.
It went 5 seasons too long.
Fuck off. The first 4 seasons of The West Wing, and I'll say this legitimately seriously, the first 4 seasons of The West Wing are my favorite 4 seasons of television ever.
I don't think that's a bad argument.
The last 3 seasons are, I still think, good, but only because I have goodwill built up for those characters already. If you don't, and if you're not in, and you started watching, toward the end of the run after Sorkin left and wasn't writing the episodes, it goes downhill a little bit.
See, I think that's one that I would actively say that I would have canceled it at the end of the Bartlett presidency, because that ended on a high note, go out on top.
Yeah. Well, and they did, and it ended with the Bartlett presidency, but you had to watch 2 full seasons of campaign.
Yeah.
Essentially, which is, I liked it, but only because I already loved those characters so much, and I could see how others watching it not so much. So for non-Sorkin, let's bring it back, because I am obligated legally to talk about Aaron Sorkin in every podcast.
Brett, can you dig us out of this Sorkin hole, please?
Yeah,
not his hole, but the Sorkin. I just wanted to
what about Sorkin's hole now? I do have some ideas as well. I think we ought to stick with the shows that left too early category and just wrap that up before we break into some of the subcategories.
Good call.
A show that Toph highly recommended, and I'm not even all the way through, but I can already tell that it was gone too soon, is Twin Peaks. That's one that is typically talked about whenever you see these lists online, because there was just so much material there and so many characters that clearly aren't going to fully get explored, and I think that's a place where a lot of people want to live, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I think there's, having not even seen how the show technically ended, I know that many people crave more of it. A show that I will throw in here into the conversation may not even be on your guys' radar, I'm not sure, but it was a show called Earth 2, aired, I believe, on Fox in the early 90s, and it was a really fascinating show about this kind of hodgepodge group that had to go find a new place to recolonize, and there was a lot of mystique that kind of came in, where you ended up finding that there were people living under the ground, and there was just all the, of mice and men types of issues that come up. Lost, I think, dealt with a lot of the same types of issues, where you got this hodgepodge group of people. How are they going to get along? How do they establish a community? How do they find out ways to get enough food, have safe places to live, etc.? And so I thought that was just a really cool concept, especially putting it out in space. So I'm a big nerd. I like things like that. And then the other category of shows that were gone too early for me are a lot of the comedies that I really respected. Arrested Development goes down in history as one of the greatest comedies that nobody watched. The show was so well written. There were so many in-jokes and subtle, dry humor references and running jokes that went from one show to the 4th show of the next season to the 3rd show of the last. It was just so smart that I think it was doomed by getting bounced around and not ever settling in with its audience. And kind of in that same vein, Community has had that type of a run, where it's a very smart commentary, and it's almost the anti-show show. And they did a lot to change the writing staff and change, who was running the show and things from periods of time, that it ended up ruining the show's ability to gain an audience in a pretty tragic way. And then there's only one other that was a very short run, show called Happy Endings. Either of you familiar with that one?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I liked it a lot.
I liked it a lot as well. They did a really smart thing by including some characters in, stereotypical situations acting in non-stereotypical ways, which I loved. It was kind of the anti-Friends in a sense, a show which I still love, but it was very conscientious of don't do what they expect us to do with this character because he's a gay male, or don't do what they expect us to do with this interracial couple because they're interracial.
Liza Cuthbert and Damon Wayans? Wow. How is this not on my radar?
Damon Wayans Jr.
Junior.
Sorry.
But also
he's hilarious too. That
very
actor
funny.
is great. Yes.
And so in my opinion, I think that show is, the one that took off out of that run of shows was The New Girl. That was the one that took off. I think Happy Endings
also starring Damon Wayans Jr.
Yeah, for a while there. And
he came back. He came back. Okay.
I think Happy Endings was the funnier of the two shows, and it went away too soon. I think that it had a lot of very, very funny people on it who are now going to go and get to do other things.
Right.
But I didn't catch Happy Endings until it was already canceled. And me and the wife went back and watched it after the fact. And when that happens, when it ends way too soon, when you're enjoying it still and there's no more of it left, that's the worst feeling, I think.
That's tough, yeah.
Yeah, because everything lives on Netflix now, and everything lives on, if you have to, you can go buy it on iTunes or whatever. So you can get a hold of almost everything.
Although we as a society brought Family Guy back to the air, which was a huge accomplishment. Just the amount of people.
I was more proud when we brought Futurama back, quite frankly.
Yeah.
What?
I was more proud when we brought Futurama back as opposed to Family Guy. Yeah. As humans, as a civilization.
Fair enough. But I'm just saying it was an accomplishment.
I agree. And it's more bizarre that we couldn't do it for fucking Firefly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Firefly was a show that I'm pretty sure was limited by how expensive it was to do CGI back then. And
a lot of it.
And how not like Buffy it was when they asked for another thing from Joss Whedon. Yeah, and it wasn't Buffy. It wasn't CW enough for them, or WB enough, whatever.
I haven't fallen down the rabbit hole about why Firefly was canceled. I'm sure that I could find any number of dork blogs out there about it. But I think honestly part of it was just he just didn't. I think you kind of touched on it. It didn't get buy-in, and I know that it was shown out of order on air, where it's got a pretty concrete A to B arc that kind of weaves through all those episodes. So I think that's kind of the obvious example of stuff that I think most nerds would, without hesitation, agree to bring back.
Yeah, and I think... Go ahead, Toph.
I just wanted to quickly come back on a couple of the shows Brent talked about, specifically that we are getting more Twin Peaks.
Yes.
Indeed.
In 2017 now is what they're telling us.
Oh.
I know. Well, there's a whole thing about, David Lynch announced it on Twin Peaks Day, and it was going to happen, it was going to happen soon, and then it's kind of dragged out. However, the network has now announced that it's 2017, so that gives me hope that we're actually going to get new Twin Peaks.
That it's going to happen.
And it's only taken 25 years.
Yeah, and this is my thing. This is my kind of overarching, and I feel like I like to put a bow on all these little conversations that we have in the B segment. But my overarching thing is that nothing's dead now. Nothing is off limits, which is cool, and it also goes back to what we talked about in the A segment, where you're going to get some things that you don't like. I personally love the first, 3 seasons or 2 seasons? Whatever the first run of Arrested Development was, I think it was 3 seasons. Yeah. Loved the first 3 seasons of Arrested Development. Was not wild about the 4th one.
It wasn't great.
And there are going to be missteps like that, or there are going to be things where you go, well, maybe that part's not for me. And you have to be okay with that. But nothing is dead and gone at this point. You have X-Files coming back. You have Twin Peaks coming back. You have potentially, I could see a point in time where there's more Firefly. I really could. That would be a thing. I don't know how you get Joss Whedon to do like a 24-episode TV series on a network, but if Netflix bought it, and Netflix said, do us 12-episode seasons that you can shoot like a movie, like on a movie schedule, there are not too many of those actors from that show. There are not too many actors from that show that are, blowing up in the movies that you can't afford.
Too busy.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. You could afford all of those actors to bring them back for example, a Netflix.
Hey, Castle is really good. I don't think you understand how good Castle is. So that show's doing okay.
I didn't know if you were being serious or if you're not. Do you really enjoy Castle?
No, but you know who does?
My parents do.
My parents and my wife love the shit out of some Castle.
Yeah.
And I have to say, of all the things that I am subjected to off of my DVR that I do not put there, I find that one the least offensive. So.
Oh yeah.
I'm completely neutral to pro Castle, quite frankly.
Yeah.
It's a good point by you though, Dave, and it kind of speaks to just the society we live in now. I mean, everything is customizable, including what types of shows we can still watch. The media executives are going to cave when there's enough demand, and a viral environment allows demand to be heard more readily without having to mail, large objects to California. It's important. It gives us a voice. It gives us a power, and look at all the things that have come about because we've asked for it. And to your point, whether we asked for them and they turned out good or turned out bad is kind of debatable or hit or miss. But I'm glad that Deadpool is becoming a thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is because we kept asking for it, and Ryan Reynolds was super into it, and it's going to happen now. I'd love to talk through some of your subcategories on this topic, though, Toph, as well. So
yeah, so I think the one that I think has a lot of stuff that I'd like to chat about is in this era of things getting rebooted. Is there stuff that you guys would like to see redone, either specifically in something that we can shift a genre on, or is there something that just simply like to come back and say, I would like to do this differently? For one thing, like, Gilligan's Island, we got it remade and we called it Lost, and it was much better the second time around. And, I think, unsurprisingly, probably to no one who's ever listened to me talk for more than 30 seconds, I would really like to see the Batman episodic television show brought back, where I get a half an hour of detective Batman and not the goddamn Batman, not punching Batman.
Yeah.
Just want, like detective episode kind of thing.
Well, it could totally work, and the reason why is there are umpteen million detective shows on television because it's a familiar format that people like to watch, because you get in and out in an hour, and you get to see a mystery set up, and you get to see a mystery solved in an hour, and it's with familiar kind of comfort food characters.
Yeah,
I think that you could
got
do
15 CSIs. I just want CSI Gotham.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Featuring the Batman.
Yeah, and I think it's very possible that undermines movie Batman, and that's why we haven't seen it. Or there's how do you do it convincingly? Just detective with the guy in the cowl. But I think audiences are ready for that shit. Audiences are ready for that.
So, Brent, is there something you want to see kicked off, redone, done better?
Yeah, so I have some ideas for development, and I have some ideas for reboot. Talking specifically reboot here, one of the shows I really loved growing up, granted I'm a dork, and I grew up on Indiana Jones, but I actually really enjoyed the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles.
Yes, sir.
Because not only did I get to learn more about Indiana Jones and how he learned all the stuff and, just the action-adventure components, but, they also were treated as little mini history lessons.
Yeah.
Which was just a smart format for a show and kind of a necessary component that I definitely think, whether it's our youth or just all society. It'd be great to have us have an opportunity to walk back through history and then go, oh, that was a thing, or that's what that name is in reference to, and then send me to Wikipedia to do some more reading, or YouTube to get a little bit more content. I mean, you could certainly do that storyline again and follow a different timeline from Indiana Jones' young life, or have a different but similar character. You know, in the same way I could totally see like a Forrest Gump type of a thing where you just have a character that finds himself as, you know, as a minor player in all these major historical events.
Give me an Indiana Jones Jr.
Yeah.
Give me his kid.
Give me Forrest Gump Jr. Yeah, either. I mean, realistically, that's the type of show that I think would be compelling and fun and clever in a good way. And then the other, for the exact same reasons, I think our group has given some props to kind of the Vlog brothers in the past. John and Hank Green. They do a lot of great web series, which I think would make for compelling TV. And anymore, is there really a difference between TV shows and web series? No, it's just the medium that you're in. But I'd love to see some major backing from, you know, a network to develop some of the stuff they've talked about. How do we teach kids compelling things about science, about math, about history? Cosmos was a great show that I really, really enjoyed, hosted by Neil deGrasse Tyson. And they just came out with this new one, Breakthrough. But you can develop shows like that, and one kind of topic, if we could frame it, you know, you call the show We're Broken or something like that. It's all these tiny, stupid little things in our society, in our world, that are backward, different, wrong, and spend one show talking about it. Like pennies, why do we still produce them? Have a whole show on that, just to educate the masses so that we can turn some of those educational pieces into more, national consciousness, because I definitely think the standard news media is broken. They're just going for shock statistics and things like that. If we spent some time actually diving deep and analyzing some of the issues of our society, I don't think it'd be met with the same disdain that the nightly news is, or that some of the traditional media is.
Yeah, and 2 years ago, my answer to this question would have been The Daily Show. I would have liked to have rebooted The Daily Show and essentially turn it into what last week with John Oliver currently is. I think that's the perfect format for that show. So I'm glad that exists. But one thing that whenever I answer this question, I always talk about is I try to think about things that are genre, things that we like that were launched just a little bit too early to where they had to, for example, put the X-Men in black leather instead of putting them in their costumes because the country wasn't ready for it or the audience wasn't ready for it.
Yeah.
I think that it wasn't just the costumes that, and I guess I'll speak specifically about the X-Men now, but it wasn't just the costumes that were heard. It was the types of stories that you tell and how deeply you go and the number of characters that you can introduce and support. So if I was going to reboot something, I'd really like to see the X-Men done as like a Netflix series or an HBO series.
Yeah.
With, be a little bit more on model with the characters and use the lineup of characters that there were essentially in the 92 X-Men series.
Cartoon show, yeah.
I would like to see, like, one of my favorite characters, and he's, obviously they've kind of taken this character in a different path over the last 5 years. One of my favorite characters of all time when I was a kid was Cyclops, and Cyclops is like a neutered man baby in all of the X-Men movies. Whereas, like, in the
he's no Gambit, let's be clear.
All right, you guys and your love for the Gambit, I really don't. It's not a thing. I get it. I mean,
No, but Cyclops was the leader of the X-Men for good reason. And yes, he's been cuckolded in every X-Men media that's been produced, by Hollywood, and that is a shame.
Yeah, and I think it's because a love triangle sells, right, in a trailer. Sure. But I would like to see that rebooted and, more it's not like the Fox X-Men movies are bad. It's that they've kind of painted themselves into a corner now where they have this universe that they have to respect, even though they know that they did it wrong to start.
Yeah.
You know, they know that the first X-Men movie was a product of the time, not a product of what they wanted to do. I bet you if you gave that series to Bryan Singer, who's really passionate about the material, and gave him no limitations whatsoever, that series would look a lot different. A lot differently than it does now.
If done right, a standalone Cyclops movie could be really compelling.
Yeah.
For that reason.
You got to destroy what was built, though, and that's always a tough thing.
Yeah. I don't think you can cast James Marsden.
No.
I mean, probably the casting. I'm just saying, like, you can't. He was a neutered bitch in all the movies, so now all of a sudden,
So I got really excited.
Cyclops, I will say that.
I got really excited when they announced X-Men First Class, right? Because they said it was a reboot of the series, and I was really excited to see the first class of X-Men from the comics. I was excited to see them revive and reboot and redeem Cyclops and Jean and Beast and Iceman and who the fuck am I missing?
Did you just say Beastman? Iceman, Angel, Jean Grey,
I'm missing
Cyclops.
Angel. Was the one I was missing.
Archangel.
Nice man.
So if you had those characters
He
in
was
X-Men
Angel back
First
then,
Class,
but yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no. If you had those characters in X-Men First Class and started this new trilogy the way you wanted to do it, originally, I think you could have done a great job. Because I love X-Men First Class as a movie. I just don't like any of the characters really outside of Professor X and Magneto. So that would be kind of mine within the genre world, is I'd like to reboot that, because I was a huge X-Men fan when I was a kid, and the comics have kind of written themselves into a corner a little bit, and the TV shows or the movies have done the same.
I think the only one that I have that is kind of in the same genre is Farscape, which I may be one of the 15 people on Earth who really liked Farscape. It was on in the early 2000s, I want to say, somewhere in that neighborhood. But it was in conjunction with the Jim Henson workshop, and it had some puppets that were pretty puppety. The idea is there's a cast of people who are thrown together. There's a sentient ship. There's general space hijinks, I think we can say, and the concepts were really good, and it was funny, and it had a good soul to it. However, there was supposed to be a weird alien that ended up just looking like an owl, and some of the barrier of entry was set almost higher than a Doctor Who in terms of you suspend disbelief so you can accept the storyline that's going on. I would love to see that rebooted now, and I don't want to change thematically, I want to keep it the same, but I would love to see that updated a little bit, which is funny because we're talking about a time period that was 15 years ago, and we're saying, oh God, please update this because it looks so bad.
Yeah. So there is one, you just spurred my memory of one that I would definitely reboot, tomorrow. If you gave me, if you told me, hey, we want you to do a 12-episode season, and you could choose pretty much anything you want, what would you do and what would you have the most fun with? Is another sci-fi show that I watched on Sci-Fi when I was a kid, the Sci-Fi Network. I would reboot Quantum Leap. I think that's
another perfect opportunity for the history lesson.
Exactly,
yeah, right?
Exactly. Whereas Doctor Who has episodes that are kind of Quantum Leapy, and by that I mean Quantum Leap did some shit that was Doctor Who-y, because Doctor Who came first, right? But
Doctor Who did it first. Be cool.
Yes. But they have some episodes that are like that, where you have Doctor Who going back and talking to Vincent Van Gogh and then bringing him to the future or whatever. That's a classic episode where there is some history stuff, but there are a lot of episodes that are very futuristic or very have to do with the lore of Doctor Who, which are the aliens, the Daleks, whatever. Yeah. Quantum Leap was great because it was unburdened by all of that, and it was just a straight time travel thing where it had to do with history or it had to do with a specific plot. I don't know, a specific example in the plot.
Device.
What was the main goal of Quantum Leap? Was he trying to get back into his own time and body or something?
He was an astronaut, and then he was a weird shapeshifter from week to week. I don't think there was a point.
No,
So
but
the-
might have been part
no,
of the
the-
problem.
like Sam was trying to get him to a specific place, but
No,
he
the-
just had to
what?
go all these other places
Yeah,
first
the
or
point-
something.
The point was he wanted to get back to his time, to his body, right? But every time, at the end of every
So, yeah.
episode, he would make a quantum leap, and it would be into the next thing.
and it
where
would be
it was
wrong.
it was like he was on shuffle, right? It was like he had a 5,000
Right.
song playlist, and he was on shuffle trying to get to one specific song.
Right.
Is kind of how I remember it being. But I liked it because you got the cold open for the next episode
Yeah.
at the very end of the episode
Right.
you were watching, which was an
Right.
awesome device. And it was a show that I watched on repeats on the Sci-Fi Channel,
Mhm.
so I never got them in order.
Definitely.
No, and honestly, it barely even matters. It's kind of the beauty of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was great. It was great. I would reboot that show, and you put somebody fun in the lead role. You could even do it just as a straight,
Yeah.
like you could do it way more comedy than Quantum Leap was originally, and it still works. I bet you if you go back and watch those shows, because it was made in the early '80s, there's a lot of like cringeworthy, like cross-dressing humor
Yeah.
or
Well, it's funny.
gay
I
panic.
actually
or
I
things like
watched
that,
it.
but-
They added
That's
it to
yeah. I
Amazon,
bet it.
like 6
I bet
months
it's
ago, and I went through and watched
Not
it.
PC.
It's, I mean, less than you'd think though. There is
Okay.
some of it, but honestly, like I kind of, I'd heard a great deal about it. I knew people liked it and revered it, and it was kind of campy or whatever else. And I went into it with like, again, just like a super low bar of expectation, and I actually really liked it. There were a couple of like, ooh, oh, well, yep, oh,
Yeah.
in a dress, that's not okay.
but
It was far less than I actually expected.
yeah, and I think there are a lot of shows that are guilty of that, and some of the most beloved shows that we have, sitcoms especially. You have your Cheerses and your Friendses and things like that come to mind where they are of their time, not as timeless as you'd like them to be.
Yeah.
My last example of thing I would reboot, we've talked about before, so I won't go into detail, but I would be remiss if I didn't go down the Batman rabbit hole and say I would immediately cancel Gotham today. But what I would do is just go back in time and do it as the Gotham Central show that it should be, the Rucka Brubaker Gotham Central show that it should be.
Well, and that's the thing. I would be fine with that as CSI Gotham.
Yeah.
Ryan Gotham. I would be fine with this as CSI Gotham. That
There you
almost
go.
has nothing to do with the Bat in the same way that Gotham doesn't have a lot to do with the Bat. And just have, like you were saying, the Gotham Central show. I would still like to play in that universe,
Yeah.
even without the Bat being present.
Yeah, and even if he's only like it happens in the comic, he's only present for
Exactly.
the end of an arc or
Sure.
at a pivotal moment when your heroes are in trouble or whatever. I think
Yeah.
it helps.
Because I think that gets away from the issue of having to worry about the continuity of the movies and everything else. Like, just let him pop in and out.
Story again.
I don't know.
The
I don't want to
new-
do the origin story. I just want to.
But make the costume unique. Oh, look at the new bat gadget. Yeah,
Nipples.
you get to avoid all that
Bat
stuff. Right?
nipples. I don't need
Yeah.
that in my life.
So,
All right.
moral of the story, like I think Dave said, we have lots of things we can do over again. We can expand on where they're worthy of it. But yeah, I think we have that power as consumers of media right now, and it's an exciting time to love some media because it's coming at us for sure. So
come into the comments at popnerdery.com. That's where my uprising for the Batman show will take place, as well as my Farscape uprising.
Should just start writing episodes of that CSI Gotham show.
Don't play with my emotions.
Right in the
Don't you play
comments.
with my emotions. And also, hit us up on the Twitters at PopNerdery, and let us know what shows that you would either like to smother in their sleep with a pillow so they can just blissfully go away, or if there's something you feel needs to be redone, hit us up, let us know about it, and we'll spit out some flaming hot takes back at you.
All right, let's take our second break.
And welcome back. So far, we've gotten a couple headlines. We dove in deep talking about some television programs we'd love to see rebooted or done differently. And at this point in the show, we just want to talk about some of the recommendations we might have for you guys as listeners and our friends here right on the PopNerdery Podcast. So, Dave, did you have a recommendation for us, buddy?
I do. I have a couple quick ones. last episode or the episode before, I brought up the Stephen Colbert Late Show. I have an update to that one. I have watched it and it more since then, and it seems to be a lot of the same stuff every night. So maybe what was new and novel to me has worn off a little bit. I'd still do like his monologue, and usually maybe that first segment. But he goes into these bits or these characters. I feel like he's just very comfortable inside of a different character and not necessarily comfortable being himself, and that kind of gets old. But I would like to very quickly recommend Seth Meyers, as well as I mentioned John Oliver's Last Week Tonight. Those are two things that I would just like to make sure that everybody is watching, because if you're not watching it, you are probably doing something wrong with your life.
Yeah, I definitely think people are sleeping on that a little bit. Seth Meyers I'm not as into, but now that you've mentioned him a few times, I'll try to get something other than just the YouTube clips.
Well, and Seth Meyers did a really great episode of a podcast. It used to be a Grantland podcast. Rest in peace, Grantland.
R.I.P.
We're all Grantland, whatever we're going to call it. Andy Greenwald did a pop culture podcast for them, and one of his last episodes was an interview with Seth Meyers about his late night show and his time on SNL. That's a really good listen, and it makes me that much more invested in the success, not success, of his late night show.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And just to kind of piggyback on a conversation we were having earlier, I definitely think the We're Broken by the Vlog Brothers is very much being covered by Last Week Tonight in a very comical way. And so I guess when I was framing that up, it was less comedy, more just logic. But but either way solves the point we're trying to solve. So get up on some Last Week Tonight tomorrow. Toph, you got some recommendations for us, big guy?
Yeah, so I'm going to recommend the Wes Anderson collection by Matt Zoller Seitz. It's got a foreword by Michael Chabon, who, if you've ever read words that are novels in American, you know how good Michael Chabon is. It's 300 pages as a coffee table style format book. Came out in 2013. It's basically, I think if I said the title and you went, ooh, this book is for you. And if I said the title and you went, you should probably stay away from it, because if you're not, I don't know if I've ever met anyone who wasn't. I think Wes Anderson fandom is pretty binary. You are or you aren't. There's very little middle ground in terms of I get this and I want to put all of it into my eyes, or I don't think this is for me. So if it is for you, this book is fantastic. It's 10,000 word essays on Rushmore and interviews, and tangentially to this podcast, he discussed his movies are known for their level of minutia and detail and like really specific things. And he talks about how one of the first things he ever really got into and loved was Star Wars. And he went back and talked about like finding all of the production art and like going back and looking at all the diagrams, like the ship diagrams and the station diagrams, and finding all of this itty bitty minutia. And he said that he wished that had been in the movies themselves. And I think I don't know they would have been the same movies if they had been. However, it's all something that we've all done. Right, we've all gone and looked at the production art at the beginning. We talked about Starkiller at the beginning of this. Like, this is something we've all done. He just wants to then put that stuff directly into his movies. So it's really fascinating. Look through all of the stuff he's done, all the way through Moonlight, I think is the last one discussed here. So if you're into the Wes Andersons, go ahead, get it. It's gorgeous. It's big. It's thick. Wow. That got weird.
It's gorgeous, it's big, it's thick.
Yep.
That's all you need to know, Pop Nerdery listeners.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. Nope, that's a perfect capstone to that recommendation.
Yeah.
You sold the shit out of that book.
Girthy books, that's what I need on my coffee table. So I had just a couple things come to mind here. One thing specifically is a podcast that I'm definitely interested in. I talked earlier about Neil deGrasse Tyson and the Cosmos Show, as well as Breakthrough, being produced by Nat Geo. Breakthrough, I think, is something that everybody needs to probably put their eyes on. It's pretty compelling stuff. And then just the Star Talk podcast is something I'm always super enthralled by. I feel like I learned something. I feel like I laugh. I feel like I think about things differently, which is always important to me. There was one specific episode very recently where he had former President Bill Clinton on, and it was just kind of interesting perspective that I never necessarily got on Clinton. Not being a very political person and getting most of my imagery of who presidents are from Saturday Night Live. It was pretty great to hear Clinton talk about science and the role that it's kind of played in his life and how much he knew about some of the things that had been going on in science over the last 10, 20 years and where he sees technology headed and how it's going to impact the lives of day-to-day Americans, and thus how the government needs to be ready to adapt. So it was pretty good stuff. So that episode of Star Talk, and any of them, definitely. And then the last quick recommendation I'll make to the whole PopNerdery world at large, but specifically you, Dave, and Toph, is a YouTube channel I just stumbled upon called Nerd Writer 1. The guy has over 150 videos. Each of them delves into one topic pretty ad nauseum and thinks things through pretty analytically. It's, most of the videos are, 8 to 15 minutes long and do a really awesome job at just picking up on some of the minutia of something or why things ought to be thought about differently. So, nice. Nerd Writer 1 on YouTube. I love it. So,
I want to throw one more recommendation. I'm sorry, I meant to do this, but your example that brought in Bill Clinton made me think of John Mulaney's new stand-up special on Netflix. He had a sitcom, very short-lived on Fox. And it didn't go well. I didn't particularly. I didn't like it. The critics didn't really like it. It didn't last very long. But his stand-up is very good. And he's back. He did this stand-up for Netflix, and he did it at the Chicago Theater. And it caps off on the time he met Bill Clinton when he was 10. And it's a really funny and entertaining story. And when you mentioned Star Talk, it made me think of that, and it was a fun one. He got married between his last stand-up special and this one, so he talks a little bit about marriage and what it's like to be a newlywed and house hunt, and that's a point that I'm at in my life, and it was fun. It was a fun watch.
Cool. Yeah, anything that speaks to you in the moments of your life is pretty easy to recommend for other people that are going through that stuff or not. So, absolutely. Good stuff. Well, as always, gentlemen, that's the excellent content. I loved hearing your thoughts on certain things, and that kind of brings us to the end of the PopNerdery Podcast, Episode 4. Thank you so much for listening. As a reminder, definitely join in on the conversation. Comment section right in the posts at popnerdery.com for the podcast. Rate and review us on iTunes. Help out the show. Tell your friends. But let us know what we're missing, different angles that we didn't think through, examples of stuff we should be talking about, ideas for the next cast. And until then, I'm going to bid everyone a nice adieu. Dave, where can we find your stuff?
Yeah, I tweet as at PopNerdery for the podcast and the website. If you'd like to hear me yell about either politics or sports, you can follow me at Dave Foltz. But for anything that we talk about related to the show, at PopNerdery, that's me.
Good deal. And Toph, where can we find more of your flaming hot takes there, pal?
Yeah, you can find me at The Hospital Ball. But you probably shouldn't. Let's be honest. I'll just disappoint you.
Well, with that glowing endorsement of one of our one of our media figures, I will go ahead and plug my Twitter handle at shouldn'tbragbutt. Until next time, everybody, finger guns.
Finger guns.
And, yeah, we'll see you on the flip side.
There you go.
I'll see you in bed in a minute. What? Hi. Hello.
All right.
I'll see you when you're putting your other pant leg on.
Just when you're at your most vulnerable, I'll be there, behind you, waiting.
That is your most vulnerable, when you're in between, when you have the first leg on and the second leg,
Yep.
like at the cusp, at the precipice of the second.
You're already halfway to tripping there anyways, so
Oh yeah.
little nudge one way or the other and you're done.